and welcome to this week's review of My Hero Academia Vigilantes, the anime. This week I'm reviewing the latest episode titled Major. We kick off this review, as we always do with these reviews, by talking about the positives and the headline positives. I loved the bilingual flavourings to this episode. I think they introduced a new character very well, and it gives us a fine insight into how other nations' hero traditions feel. I will admit that my first point of praise and how I put it in the headline positives might feel a little bit odd, but I will be honest with you, it's the most succinct way that I could say. I like the fact that they had characters speaking both Japanese and English throughout this episode, depending on what the scene at the time required of them, which itself is a very wordy way of saying I like the fact that in this episode people are speaking both Japanese and English. I will admit that this is something that will be totally lost on anyone that is watching this dubbed, but this is an element of the episode that I really did love. I think that there's something in the back of my mind that's telling me that I think that when I did my manga review that this is something I hoped would be introduced into this part of the story if it ever got an anime. I'd have to go back and check that, but certainly in the hero now, yeah, I really do love that, because it's just one of those little elements that makes this episode feel like this is everything that I could have hoped this episode would be. This is pretty much everything I wanted. Everything I could have wanted to happen, happened here. I mean that stylistically, because yeah, I've read the manga, so I know certain things are happening, but the way in which it was executed was just absolutely wonderful to me. This was as close to perfect an adaptation of it I think you could possibly get. Like, I know that the fact that some characters speaking in English in certain moments, it may feel like an odd area of praise, but for me, like I say, this is an element of this episode that really helped it go to the next level. Because, let's be blunt, Captain Celebrity isn't just an American superhero, he is an American superhero. Great effort is placed in this episode and the one prior to establish that hero culture is very different between Japan and the United States. So to have him speaking perfect Japanese and all the media about him being in Japanese, I think would have taken something away from that, because whilst you can headcanon a reason as to why he speaks good Japanese, with the media show of him, like that sizzle reel towards the start of the episode, that being made for an American audience and being in Japanese would have felt odd. I mean, not in a way that would have taken anything away from those clips, but it would have been done in a way which would have made them feel less authentic. This guy is supposed to be an American superhero. This is very much a short little bit of American fluff for his fans over there, so to have it in Japanese would have felt a little bit strange to me, but the fact that they've actually done this, I think, yeah, it really does elevate those moments for it. It makes it feel a lot more authentic, and I will be honest, there's a part of me that thinks it would have been neat if the moment in the episode where both him and Makoto are speaking in English, had that been done by the American voice actors. I think that would have added something else into it, or at least have Captain Celebrity being his English voice being whoever voices him in the dubbed version of the anime. I think that would have really taken it to the next level, but even still, I really do dig this. I love how this has all been put together. And they didn't need to do any of this. Let's underline that. They didn't need to do any of this, as most audiences would have been fine with everyone just speaking Japanese, and that being the long and short of it. That would have been perfectly fine for just about everybody watching this, or the vast majority of people watching it. And let's be honest, like I said previously, the vast majority of people watching this outside of Japan are going to be watching this with the English dub, so this whole element of the episode is going to be totally lost on them. But the fact that they did it in the first place, I think is bloody neat, and is one of those just great elements of just execution and flair and creativity that I really do love about the Vigilantes series. It is one of the things, maybe the fact that it's a spin-off and there's less focus, there's less pressure on it, means that it can have these moments where it's a lot more just stylistically and creatively different, because that's something I think is missing from the main series in some regards, but here they can do stuff like it, and it really does bloody land for me. And this is an element that really does sell like the culture shock moment we get later on in the episode, you know, after he almost outs himself as getting back into old habits and shagging around. We have the moment where Makoto comes up with this PR stunt to make it look like, oh no, he's changed his ways and he's become more of an inspirational figure, but it's done in a way which, as I mentioned when I read this in the manga, it feels very odd to me as someone who isn't Japanese. Like, typically when you'd have a character like this in a TV show or a movie or a comic book or whatever, who's known for shagging around and being something of a Casanova or something of a Lothario, the remedy to that in those scenarios is, oh, you make them look more sensible and sensitive and kind-hearted, and they're just more like a wise older brother rather than the raging lunatic that they're made out to be in the press. Whereas in this, they make out that he's this super manly guy who he's too tough and he's too serious about the moment. He doesn't waste his time fooling around, chasing after girls, man, which is something that, from his point of view, is something he's not going to really get or understand. He's probably going to think, this is going to make me look worse, but you know what? It adds to the moment. And when you have that bit where you have the zoom in and look at his face and he just has that really embarrassed look on him, I think that works well. And I'll just point out there's a slight alteration between the way in which it's executed in the anime and in the manga, and this is one of the changes I think works well. It's only a minor thing, but in the manga, the show Pop Step, and I think Crawler, or at least Crawler, being part of that big hype squad for Captain Celebrity, and then you have the bit in the episode, like we see in the episode, where they're talking about, oh, that looks a bunch of nonsense, why are they doing that? Even though it's clear that at least Crawler's there, so he understands why they're doing that. He was there. I think even in the manga, he's wearing the same outfit, so he knows why that's happening, so I am glad that they kind of retconned it for him not to be in that. I think he might still be somewhere in the anime. I don't know, because I was too busy enjoying the episode to really look in that forensic level of detail. I think that this really does help to play into the fact that this is very much a new character in a new world. I loved the introduction of Captain Celebrity as a character, as well as his way in doing things. Like I say, towards the start of the episode, we get that sizzle reel, which is done with the American voice going over it, and I really, again, I love that element of it. I love the fact that they aren't just doing the thing that you get a lot of in just well, anything really, in animation more generally, where you have a character from a different country, yet any kind of material connected to them is still spoken in whichever language the program's made in. Like in this case, this could easily have been just done in Japanese and no one really cared. And if this was like a Japanese hero in an American story, all this stuff that would have been done for them probably would have been done in English. And the fact that it actually went this way with it, I think, really does work. And I love the video itself. You get this great little sizzle reel of him saving the day all around the United States while the pseudo Linkin Park music plays in the background. And you know what? Had his costume been less colourful and he'd been looking more miserable, and the colour palette of the video been more brown and grey, with that music in the background, it would have been the perfect replication of late 2000s, early 2010s superhero fiction, god damn it. But still, I love that element of it, and it just helps to really show what a very different hero from a very different world he is. And I don't just mean that in the sense of, oh, he's an American hero working in Japan, but also the fact that his way in doing hero work is fundamentally different to any other character we have in this particular series, and arguably with the main series itself. As Pop Step says, half of all the heroes in Japan, to some degree or another, are entertainers. They're not all like Irasawa, where they're just going out knocking bad guys in the head and then going to bed. They have this kind of flair and dynamism and showmanship to them. And here we are seeing a character who is very much an entertainer as well as being a superhero. How he saves the day is done in a very performative way, with a performative flair, unlike other characters in the series. All Might is close to that, but even still, he's far more focused on getting the job done in a way that Captain Celebrity isn't. He does these big shows, he has hype squads, he has cheerleaders, he has his theme music playing in the background. I'll grant you, not the theme music isn't quite how I imagine it to be, but still, it works very well, and it helps to set up the fact he's a fundamentally different type of superhero in many ways. His power is a very traditional superhero superpower. He flies about and knocks people in the head. It's a very traditional, just generic superpower thing, and I do like that, and it ends up creating this contrast between him as well as our main characters in this series. They are all just very standard hero superpowers. You got two characters that can kind of jump good, and one that just punches people really hard. He has his own merchandise, his own costume, his own iconography, and yet our cast have just got stuff that are just kind of found in the shops. And this shows us a very different side of the hero world that we don't have within this series, as well as the main series itself. And all the while, Captain Celebrity is introduced in a way here that is charming in that way the charismatic so-and-so in shows like this are. He's showing in a way in which, yes, he is a very self-important shit to be certain, but he's that kind of self-important so-and-so that you're just fascinated by. Is you just can't help but either love to hate him, or you just find him some way hilarious. He is an incredibly self-important person, as we see in this episode. And that's what makes him so fascinating. He is a very... From what we see of him here, he feels very manufactured. He feels almost fake in a way. How he's presented here, it is very much... The hype squad is doing a lot of the lifting for him. He is not a heroic hero. He's a hero, yes, he's saving the day, but he's doing it in a way which feels very fraudulent in a way. And he's the kind of person that Stain would love to hate. Captain Celebrity really does embody the kind of stuff that Stain hates when it comes to heroes. Even though Captain Celebrity is still saving the day and still saving people. And it does, I really do love the fact we do get to see him just constantly one-up and outdo Crawler at every step. It is, yes, annoying on the one hand, but on the other hand, I can't help but find it funny. I really do love this character. They're one of my favourite ones that are introduced in Vigilantes. They just have such a very different vibe to everyone else in the series, and that's what makes them such a fascinating character to watch. It gives us an insight into a very different side of superhero work, the side that's a lot more about celebrity and a lot more about showmanship. He is, yes, he's very much an American superhero, but his style of doing things, as has been hinted to and established in the main series, is just part of how this industry works. It isn't all about saving people, it's also about looking good and looking heroic whilst doing it. Albeit he does it in a way which is far more cynical. He's thinking very deliberately as to who he's saving. Like, you have the moment midway through the episode of, I think this is very much deliberate, like the episode 2 of this episode, where we've got the building that's about to fall down, and you've got the sumo wrestler and the lady, and Crawler has to carry the sumo wrestler because because Captain Celebrity coming out with the lady on his arms is a better visual image and looks cooler than going out lifting out the fat guy, right? That's the idea. It's very much about not what is practical, but what is serviceable to his ends, which is making sure that he is seen to be the absolute most glamorous and amazing superhero possible. And that is the name of the game. We are seeing a very different side of this industry, and he's a product of that very different side of the industry. He's a product of a side of the industry that we don't really see in the main series. It is hinted to here and there, but we don't have anyone that's really going into it in such a very deliberate way. Yes, we see characters who are shallow and who are very much thinking about their ranking as far as the top 100 Billboard chart in Japan, but we don't have anyone that goes after it to quite this way, who tackles it in such an industrial kind of way as Captain Celebrity does. And it's a side of this whole superhero world that I really wish that we saw more of. Characters that are this kind of shallow are just introduced to be a gag or fan bait or someone to be made of an example of before they get defeated by some big bad edgelord kind of villain. However, the truth is that in industries like this one, it's those kind of people that tend to do very well for themselves. And yes, this series can be cynical in places, optimistically cynical all the same, but with that said, I really do wish that we just saw characters who are very much more, I want to be a big-time celebrity, I want to be a big-time celebrity hero. What steps can I make? Who are the people that I can say that are going to have the best impact on me? What are the events and the places I can go to which are really going to raise my profile? Like, it's a very cynical, very nasty way in looking how the superhero world works, but it's one that really does make sense, and it's one that we know is an aspect of this world. How Captain Celebrity saves the day with the showmanship and prioritising who he's saving is the harsh reality, the end result as to how this hero industry works in practice. The prior episode set that out clearly. It made it very clear that at the end of the day, the people that do the best and ends up rising up the Billboard charts and who are the most successful are the ones that are the most spectacular, the ones that get the job done but do it with flair. And Captain Celebrity, like I say, is one that does that with machine precision. And he is the example of that side of things in a very thrillless way. Like, we see it to a certain degree with All Might, but still with All Might we know that deep down he's a good character. With Captain Celebrity, what we know of him in this moment, he's just really cynical. He's just someone who is just doing this in a way which makes him famous and makes him rich. And it ends up also showing the dangers that this kind of world and this kind of carrying on can have with a character, as we end up learning towards the end of this episode that the reason why he's in Japan is because he's been caught shagging around a lot. So this all comes together to create a character that's almost perfectly designed to create someone that you just love to hate, and acts as a near perfect foil for our cast. He is a very different beast to any other character in this series, be the main series or this one. He's a character that understands perfectly how this industry works, and he is going to run with it as far as he can, and by extension it gives us an insight, a hint as to how different the American industry is. Even just a hint though, because in the episode itself they talk about how weird it is that he has all the cheerleaders and the music and such playing in the background. And you get the feeling that for Captain Celebrity, that's probably something that's more normal within the context of American superhero work, which is something that's kind of really interesting and something that you kind of wish you'd see more of, and just how radically different how these two hero societies function to one another. And it does give us an insight as to how it works, certainly on that higher level of it, where you can have these heroes as saving the day, but at the same time you've practically got a pop concert going on around them. And I do find that element of things interesting. Like I said in the previous episode, I love learning more about the industrial side of things like this, how these things function on just more of a mechanical level. And this is an episode that, beyond just the gags and silliness and the wonder of seeing such a horrible little bastard as Captain Celebrity, there is that insight as to just how this works in a very frank way. Like characters like Crawler, if he was to become a hero, his best chance of becoming a top 10 would be to do the kind of selfish shit that Captain Celebrity's doing. That's just the way that these things work, and this is an episode that says that a lot of heroes that got high ranking did so because they know how to play their audience, which is something I do like, because it just, again, shows just how cynical this thing can be. With that said and done, however, let us get into the negatives. I'll just be blunt before we get into the overview. I love this episode. I think the episode itself is near perfect for me. But there's one issue that I do have with it, and it isn't with the episode itself, but with the post-credit scene. I will be blunt, I think that went on for far too long. If you haven't seen the post-credit thing, now is your opportunity to go back and go to the episode and watch it. I'll wait for you. You can just pause this video. But for the rest of us, I will just say I think that went on for far too long. I think the better way to do it is that Crawler picks up the phone, his dad's on the other side, and says, "Crawler, your mum is dun dun dun," and it gives the hint that, oh, something might be nasty, something might be wrong, and then you come back next week and you feel like, oh, she's just coming to visit. We got what felt like a good half or a good quarter's worth of information. Not even a half, I'm being over exaggerating, but it feels like we got 5 minutes worth of an episode at the end of this one, which could have gone into next week's episode. And yeah, the whole thing of, I've got to make the place look spick and span for my mum, because she's such a stickler for discipline and what have you. Yeah, I know that can be a bit of a trite, cliched thing, but I think that for a series that is running along at the speed that it is, I will be honest, having just that at the start of next week's episode would have been fine, because I've got this nasty feeling that next week's episode is going to open with the post-credit bit for this week's episode. I've got this nasty feeling that's going to be opening for it. It's going to be a case of, okay, for those of you who saw it, can we move on? For those who didn't, okay, for those who didn't, it's not a problem. For the rest of it, it's a case of, okay, we know what this is, we could move on from it. And there's nothing about well, of course, the episode, it's about setting up the whole thing of Crawler having to figure out who his fake girlfriend's going to be, which is a fun thing, but even still, it went on for too long for me. It felt like a whole other episode was starting, when you don't want that for a post-credit thing. You want that to be hints and teases for other things that are coming even in the next episode or later on in the story. Not what it feels like the first 5 minutes of the next episode. It's not a major issue, but it just feels like if there's one fault with this episode, it's that. But with that said, let us get into the overview and just say that I really did love this episode. I think that it did everything it needed to perfectly. It introduced a new character in a way which is fun, exciting and interesting, and it did so with a level of creative flair that I really do wish this was present in the main series. Now granted, given how little is left with the main series, you can't really do much with that. But it just got, I suppose it is, like I said earlier on, that because this is a spin-off and there's less pressure on it, they can be a lot more out there and creative with some of their ideas in a way which the main series can't be. Or at least as far as the adaptation of the manga, or some of the adaptation, yeah, it would be adaptation of the manga. The anime itself couldn't be. Like, I remember, like, with the stuff with Star and Stripe, I think it is weird that when we had the stuff with her on the military base in the little town that we had with her, she wasn't speaking in English. She was speaking in Japanese. I understand that in just a meat and potatoes production point of view, but if this had the kind of flair to it that that this has, where you can have people speaking in English, albeit Japanese actors speaking English, I think that would have added something to those moments, but still, it's not something that would have taken away from it. Otherwise, the fact it's done the way that it is. Still, with that said, I love this episode, and I'm really interested to see what else they could do with this character. With that said and done, however, let's get into Comment Corner! It's time for Comment Corner. We've got a fistful of comments this week. Our first one comes from Big X1, who says, "It was a fun episode. I found the comic art weird, though thought it stands out to me too much to me. Thank you for your comment. Apologies for getting the comment itself wrong." I've seen that being said with a few people online, but I think the biggest criticism I've seen of that whole sequence is, of course, referring to the history lesson that came in the previous episode. I think the biggest critique that I've seen online from a lot of people with that is more so that it went on a bit too long for them. Which, for me, wasn't a problem because I love just how all of that was done. So, yeah, it is a different strokes for different folks. Next comment comes from Jack O'Lantern, who said, 3 things. Are you surprised by how fast this is going? What do you think there could be the creative reason behind such a fast-paced adaptation? Also, with Vigilantes' success, do you think this could encourage more spin-offs of existing and future shonen anime in general for the future? And third, I want to say that I like the new Knuckle Duster bumper from the last episode. I hope they use it often. Thank you for your comment, and just go through this quickly because I did reply to them directly. The reason why I just think that this adaptation is as fast paced as it is because they are very deliberately sticking to the thing that I think that they said at I think it's at the start of the 5th volume, or it might be towards the end of the 4th volume, where they say something along the lines of, "This has been our season 1," and as such, they're really deliberately trying to stick to that. They want to make sure that everything that is in the first 4 volumes, give or take an episode, has been adapted. And I'm not too keen on that, I will admit. I think that, as I've said in the past, you could easily have done a very competent season 1 with just the first 2 volumes, with a little bit of filler and a few things being elaborated here and there, especially bearing in mind you have the entire series to draw material from. But even with that said, I still think that it is good for what it is, even though I do wish that it took its time a little bit more. As to whether the success of this will encourage more spin-offs, I would like to see it, because I think that it's a good compromise of a lot of series. I mean, let's be honest, TV stations and animation studios, they really love money. And the truth of the matter is that there have been a lot of cases, not just in the realm of anime, but also media more generally, where there have been attempts to continue a series on without a major creative voice being in it, and it's not turned out too well. You know, a great example of this would be Dragon Ball GT, and then more recently we got Dragon Ball Daima, which is Vector GT, but done right, but you get the idea. I think this is a fine compromise because it's a case of, okay, we want a new, let's say for example, we want something that's My Hero Academia related, but we haven't got an anime, or we haven't got a manga to draw upon. I know, let's do a short mini series of about 15 episodes, and this is what the characters did during the summer vacation between the end of the stuff at the summer camp and before they went back to school. Doesn't need to be anything big or genre redefining, but it's a fun thing to do. With Jujutsu Kaisen, you could do a thing of, here are these characters back when they were in high school, and this is just a villain that they defeated at some point, and it's a mini-series. You can do this kind of thing for pretty much any other series, in a way which is short, doesn't break the canon, and it just adds to that world. And I think that's something we might see more of. I don't know yet. I think that between this and Daima, there's more of a willingness at the moment to at least try that. And like I say, it opens the door to the possibility of more stories with the characters that you know and love, but not in a way which breaks canon, which I think is a good thing. Next up, we have Scott TV Gamer, who says, if I recall, before superpowers were originally called meta abilities, Reed Ashtru's mother called her son's proto quirk in the more traditional sense of the word. It wasn't until after their death that became the name for superpowers. This is, of course, referring to the last episode where I said that I'm more willing to accept the licensing coming from a very specific region in the United States, more so than I'm willing to accept that Reed Ashtru's mother, grandmother, or whomever was the source of the word quirk. I understand it mechanically, but at the same time, like I say, I'm more willing to accept that that the licensor thing evolved in the way that it did do, more so than the name quirk became the default just because of one person's grandmother. But at the same time, you get the idea. Whomever said this was going to be someone's grandmother anyway. And next we got Sam McFarlane, who says, I think the Vigilantes anime is way better than the manga. As I say in my comment, I respectfully disagree, but this week's episode does show that the anime can do things that the manga simply cannot. You know, you can't have the American language voice acting in a manga. You really can't. You could stylize the words or the font or whatever to make it look like it's deliberately different, but yeah, this is probably this week's episode is the bad one to read a comment like this, because I think that there's so much from the adaptation in the anime that made this episode better than you just simply wouldn't have got in the source material. But hey ho, with all that said and done, thank you all for listening, thank you all for watching. Let me know what you thought about this episode down below, and I'll get back to you in the future. Thank you all for listening, thank you all for watching, and see you next time. Goodbye! Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!